hello and welcome to the last session for today here at the Europasaal. Thank you very much for sticking around, for making it to this session. I know it's been a very intense week, very intense 2 days for some of us, 3 days for some of us. And so, yes, thank you very much for being here, for the panelists, the speakers, and the audience for finding your way to join us here. Also because I think that our session here is actually one of the most important ones of the BTD. I mean, all the sessions are important, all the topics are important that are being discussed here, but everything that's being discussed in the other sessions, as in the targets, the goals, the strategies that countries and companies have, the urgency with which we need to act, all of this leads us to here, actually, because here are the people who are making all of this happen. Here are the people who are doing the really important and amazing groundwork to make sure that we can achieve everything that's being discussed in these other sessions. So that's really impressive, and I'm very honored to be here with all of you today, and that we also get to look at two very important sides when it comes to startups and innovation. The investment and support side for startups, and the entrepreneurial and startup side. So today we will start with the investment side, investor talk, where we look at impact investment and the role it plays in the startup and innovation world and what's happening in this space currently. And then we'll move on and welcome the 5 SET award winners from last night to hear about their solutions on how to tackle climate change. All right, and with that, I would like to welcome my first 2 panelists, the speakers here on stage with me. It's Aneri Pradhan from Energy Nexus. She is an award-winning climate and clean energy ecosystem builder. She founded the largest energy access accelerator in Africa called Enventure, and was acquired by Energy Nexus and now serves as their chief operating officer. Aneri's previous experience include an elemental accelerator, Meta, and the UN Foundation. Welcome, Aneri. And next to Aneri, we have Iris Tenhav, Head of Science at Extantia Capital. Iris is a trained chemist who turned into a climate tech venture capital investor, and she's currently heading the science section of Extantia Capital in Berlin. Welcome. All right, so talking about supporting startups, investing in startups, when it comes to climate tech and energy startups, traditionally this has been a space where we were always saying it's a space where investors sort of shy away from, they stay away from it, it's complicated, we need more support, we need more support structures for startups in this field. But recently this has changed a lot, and we've seen a lot of movement and almost like a little boom when it comes to impact investment. So do you feel the same way about this? Do you feel there's a lot of movement at the moment, there's a little boom? And why now? What's happening at the moment that this is going on?
So I think actually, first of all, there are 2 things. So first of all, what we're seeing right now is a clear demand signal, actually. So over the past 2 years, the amount of companies that have set science-based climate targets has quadrupled over the past 2 years. Quadrupled, it's a lot. So that, first of all, there's a clear demand for having more sustainable energy, more climate tech. Then the second point is also, I think, the energy crisis, as sad and alarming as it is, it made us realize that we need to diversify the energy supplies that we have. And that created another spark, I think, over there.
Yeah, and I will add that, yes, the amount of private investment in climate tech has definitely increased significantly in the past few years, but it's still nowhere near enough. We need trillions of dollars, both public and private money, flowing into this sector. And in 2020, it was about 600 billion that was invested. So I'm not sure what that data is for 2023, but if that's the trend, it's nowhere near the trillions that we need. Is basically what I'm trying to say, and so yes, there's a boom, but it needs to boom more.
Yeah, I actually agree, absolutely. And so how sustainable do you think is this? I think you said we've got that market demand now, which is great. So do you think it will stay like this? It will increase? Do you see, or do you feel like we're now at the tipping point? In which direction will it go? Because like you said, we need more. Do you think we're on the right path to get to the much more that we need?
Yeah, I think maybe in the coming years, I mean, I think we've seen between 21 and 22 that there was a bit of a slowdown in terms of investments because of, also the financial crisis going on. But I think that we've now recently seen the EU Green Deal and also the IRA with massive support packages. And I think that's a good sign. So even though we're maybe going into a recession or a crisis, not 100% sure yet, but with these packages, I think we'll still see an increase in the coming years.
Okay, thank you. So with all this movement at the moment, we all know that startups do need these support networks and structures, VCs, the funding. Why does impact investment play such an important role when it comes to climate tech startups? And what else is there other than funding? So why do startups need VCs, need accelerators, need these support programs? What do they get out of it?
Yeah, so speaking for the accelerator sector, they're really important launch pads for climate entrepreneurs. We see a lot of people who've left the tech sector, for example, or especially with these recent layoffs happening, that are looking to now start new solutions in climate tech. It's maybe their kind of next pivot in their life in terms of, what opportunities they can create. And that's super exciting to see. But we still need a lot of more entrepreneurs, and we need to have a lot more support services for these entrepreneurs who are new to starting a business, may have the technical skills, but not the sales capabilities or, the storytelling that's needed to fundraise. So accelerators are a really great launch pad for them. And then, of course, when they get those support services through these accelerators, then they can also, of course, raise the investment that they need to actually scale up their companies.
Yeah, agree with you. And I think an investor plays a role from a financial point of view, especially in climate tech, where at least at Extensia, a lot of the companies we see develop hardware. They come out of a technical university, have just left the lab maybe with their solution. But at that point in time, they have no revenues yet. So they wouldn't be able to get a loan from a bank. And that's where, at least from a venture capital point of view, you can come in then and really help them cross that kind of valley of death till they come to the point where they have revenues. And apart from financial support, it's of course also the network, as you're mentioning, so connecting them to the right partners for scaling up, giving them strategic business advice, for example, building a pre-sales order book, which maybe the typical engineer or scientist might not have thought about that, or sometimes even is too perfectionist. They're like, okay, no, we first need to work on this one container and it needs to be perfect before I'm going to ship it. But that's the kind of sales skills that you talk about. Like sometimes it's fine to build a pre-sales pipeline and to scale up that way.
Absolutely. So do you think that this mentoring process or access to network is as important or maybe more important than the financial side of things? Or like, where do you feel like that startups, when they talk to you or when you work with them, really, where's their pain point?
Yeah, I maybe have a good example from our portfolio. So we have a portfolio company called Hyperion. They are operating in the biogas space and they spun out of the TU Munich. It's basically a team of 5 engineers or scientists. When they spun out of the university, they were maybe quite perfectionist. So they're the ones that were going to build one containerized solution at the time. And then we came in with their seed investment round last year and also had a board seat with them. And we basically helped them to set up a pre-sales pipeline, like the Tesla Model 3 kind of idea, where you're already selling and then getting revenues from that already. And I think for them, I mean, they could have taken money from elsewhere probably, but that sort of support to build up that pipeline was really, really important for them to be a hardware business, but have software growth characteristics. So they needed more support than money. That's what I felt like, at least.
I really think it's both. It's not one or the other. I like to say that a training and support program with no funding is building a road to nowhere. You really do need the funding to go with it so that they can actually take what they're learning from the mentors and the training to actually implement. So, and as I mentioned, the climate sector is already underfunded as it is. So it really has to be both.
Okay, thank you. So what motivates investors or support programs to invest in climate tech startups? Why climate tech? Because it's really not an easy sector.
No, I think in a way, being an impact investor in venture capital, the classical venture capital model is basically comes from Silicon Valley, is only focused on financial gains. Think of all the tech giants from Silicon Valley that we know, they're all built on venture capital. So we are maybe a little bit different from these people because we care also about impact in terms of environment and social, but we're also not actually that different. So I think maybe I'm too pessimistic, but in a way I'm thinking, yeah, we are also driven by financial gains, and to think that you can attract all the funding in the world with just being an environmental or a social company, that probably doesn't work, because whether we like it or not, like, money makes the world go round. And that's also why at Extantia we don't think that betting on the green premium is not a business model that we're looking for. We want a solution to be, price competitive with the fossil-based alternative. It has to be able to stand on its own in case that the green premium falls away, right? So I don't know, curious how you feel about it, but.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting question because New Energy Nexus is a nonprofit organization, and so for us, investing in climate is clear from a mission and vision and value perspective. But we do talk to a lot of philanthropy and foundations, and they are actually quite averse to giving in the climate sector because they see it as too big or too big of a challenge for a grant to solve, or be more catalytic if it's more of a co-benefit type of giving where you're helping farmers with crop resiliency against climate than actually, funding, climate entrepreneurs, for example. And so, obviously, this is a very different sector, but actually, when you look at the amount of, philanthropy that is out there, especially what's needed for more like environmental justice type solutions, it's a drop in the bucket. And I think that's a real shame, and I would love to see more of that kind of investment too from that side.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about that before, also about the pipeline of, startups. Do we have enough startups that are moving that space, that are developing solutions? Because we need more capital, we need more investment. But do we actually have already like a large enough amount of startups there that are ready to go, that are ready to implement the solutions and that are ready to scale? And if not, where could be barriers, or where do you generally see barriers for startups in the energy and climate tech space?
Yeah, I think we do see some startups in the space, but I must also say, from the venture capital point of view, there's still a lot of funds out there that invest in software, mostly software. Like, a lot of people or colleagues I speak with are like, okay, my fund does 80% software. And, as cool as many of these software solutions might be, and they will create a quick growth model, you just can't remove greenhouse gases from the physical atmosphere with an app on your phone. So to really make a difference, we actually need hardware to move the needle on climate. And this is where I think, we still need, in that sense, maybe more support to incentivize technical teams in technical universities to take their cool ideas out of the lab and actually do something with it in the real world. And we can improve.
Yeah, I would say there's lots of entrepreneurs working on this. New Energy Nexus's mission is actually to support 100,000 entrepreneurs by the end of the decade. And we actually think that's actually very realistic in terms of the numbers of entrepreneurs that are out there. We also don't define entrepreneur as like VC-backed startup either. So maybe deal flow from that perspective may not be as big. But we do think that there's so many different kinds of businesses that are needed. In addition to the venture-backed startups, we need, more rooftop installers. We need more electricians that know how to do repair and maintenance of electric car charging stations. We need more like blue-collar workforce jobs in that sector that are honestly built by small businesses. And so we see all these different types of entrepreneurs as needed, which is why we think, 100,000 is actually not even that big of a number.
Where are you at the moment towards that 100,000 goal?
About 7,000, so we have a ways to go.
Sounds really good, Joe. And I think you need to have these really high-flying goals that motivate you to push through and to really put, your heart and your energy into that, and it drives you. Have you come across any startups or solutions lately where you say, we're talking about it's like this urgency at the moment, like that we need to scale, we need to become faster with everything we do. Have you come across any exciting technologies or startups or solutions lately where you say like, oh, that's really cool?
I have one that resonates quite well with me also on the sort of background personal level. So during my research years in academia, I used to work on a process to convert CO2 into fuels. And back in the days, I was doing that on a very small scale, very fundamental level. So we were trying to figure out how the process worked and converting grams of CO2 into grams of fuel. But then last summer, we ran into a company from Estonia called Up Catalyst, and they were actually taking CO2 and making graphite out of CO2. Now, graphite is a material that we use, for example, in battery anodes. And the bad thing about the supply chain is that it's now mostly either mined or processed in China. So from a European perspective, we're all getting quite nervous about that, especially considering the recent energy crisis. So what they do, they basically make graphite out of greenhouse gas CO2, and they also disrupt the supply chain. So we ran into that startup, and we haven't officially invested yet, but it's something that I'm very excited about, especially knowing that this technology only appeared first in the academic literature in 2016. So it's a very young technology, and in a way, it makes me feel very positive about the future. There are many things that we haven't invented yet that will be very impactful.
So we do a lot of work in emerging markets, and we actually see this as solutions there as one of the most important to fund and support because greenhouse gas emissions are rising in emerging markets, and there are less net zero targets across the board. However, there are entrepreneurs there as well that are needed to be supported both through accelerators and through investments to enable the clean energy transition in these countries. And so, technologies that we already know and love, like electric vehicles, mobility, infrastructure, solar proliferation. It's really a deployment game. And so New Energy Nexus is really focused on helping those kinds of startups just deploy, because we know adoption in these markets is what's going to drive the market more than, some breakthrough innovation.
Okay. Wrapping up here, last question. If you could, what would you want to say to young people who are thinking of maybe starting or founding a startup? What would you tell them? Why should they start a startup or found a startup in the climate tech or energy or climate space in general?
Don't solve the dumb problems of making pizza arrive to your house 5 minutes faster and those types of apps. We already have a lot of people working on those types of things. The climate crisis is already here. It's not this, elephant that's in the room. It's already being experienced all over the world. And so when it's real like that and it's urgent, the time is now, and there's no better time to be a climate entrepreneur.
Thank you.
I would first of all say don't be afraid to fail, especially if we're here in the European ecosystem. People might not feel incentivized to become an entrepreneur because they see risks, but actually rather see it as an opportunity. This is your opportunity to make a real impact in the world. So go out there, do it, fail, it's okay.
And we've got the backup now. All right, thank you very much, Iris and Aneri, for joining us here today. And with that, I would like to ask the 5 SET Award winners from last night onto stage. Thank you. Thank you. And as they're coming up to the stage, I just want to quickly talk about the SET Award, the SET Global Innovation Platform, in case you're wondering what is or who are SET Award winners. So the SET Global Innovation Platform is a project that Dina, in cooperation with the World Energy Council, started over 7 years ago. So right now, we're looking at the 7th round of SET Award winners. And we, over 7 years ago, said that the energy transition and net zero goals will not happen without innovation and without startups. And we need to make sure that all the amazing innovation startups that are out there, they need to be visible, they need to get a platform, they need to get a voice. So we thought what better way of doing that is by having an award that specifically looks at climate tech and energy startups and to make it global, because only on an international or global space can we actually achieve our goals. So every year since 2017, we've had in between 400 to 600 applications from startups from all around the world. So by now we have over 3,000 startups in our database. And so every year then we rate and rank these startups, and we have 5 categories with 15 finalists. But with so many applications, there are so many great startups out there. So we said we really want to showcase more than just the winners or the finalists. So every year we also publish the SET 100 list. So if you want to know what's happening in the world of startups and innovation every year, look at the SET 100 list. It's really amazing. And then we have our 15 finalists. We invite them to Berlin. They meet our SET jury, and so on Monday we had our SET jury meeting, and that's when the jury then in the end decides, together with pitches that happen at the Tech Festival, who will be the SET Award winner. And the Tech Festival is our annual event. It happened yesterday. Some of you might have been at the evening reception as well. It's one day where startups, investors, corporates come together to talk about solutions, their innovation, and what we need to do to just accelerate everything that we're doing. And so last night we had the SET Award ceremony and awarded 5 startups with the SET Award, and I'm very, very happy to have all 5 of you here on stage with me. I'm quickly going to introduce you by name and your company, and we'll then give you the chance to actually do what you can do really well and quickly pitch your solution and your startup. All right, so next to me is Sandy Tanasheri. He's founder and CEO of Navalt Solar Electric Boats. You won the Mobility and Transport award yesterday. Then I have Amit Saraogi, CEO and co-founder of Oorja, who won the SDG 7 category yesterday. Both of you from India, which is really great. Then we have Fernando de los Rios. He's the CEO of Hyperion Robotics, based in Finland. You won the construction and materials category yesterday. Then we have Paul Smith, Vice President, Sales Europe of Energy Dome. You won the clean energy and storage category yesterday, and Vaivu, co-founder of Heatrix, who won the industry award yesterday. So welcome and congratulations again on winning the SET Awards. It was a really tough competition and really well done. Everyone was really impressed by your solutions. And so now I want to give you the possibility to share your solutions with the rest of us in here.
So I start. So I'm Sandit from Navolt. So we build some of the finest solar boats or boats in the world. And so we address from a climate change perspective the 3% emission caused by marine transport. So we do that by building solar electric boats. We started with public transport and built ferries which were not just better, but also eventually cheaper if you see the life cycle cost. And this is not taking the cost of pollution, which nobody does, at least in the context of India. It's mostly economics that drives. And then after public transport, we moved on to the fishing sector, which is very crucial. And there are about 1.7 million boats across the world. And we have worked out a solution that can build a better boat, which remove the operating expense as well as the pollution. So in that sense, we are trying to find a solution for the marine transport. Eventually, we have to solve the cargo ships, which are responsible for 90% of the marine transport pollution. And that's still 3 to 5 years away, for which we still have to work and develop solution in the hydrogen and few other technologies which we are working on. So yeah, finally we are aiming to achieve a cleaner and quieter oceans.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, at Oorja, our mission is to solarize the agricultural sector, so decarbonize agriculture, both upstream, downstream, on-farm, off-farm. Majority of Indian smallholder farmers, these are farmers with land holding of 1 or 2 acres, average income of $100 per month. Mostly rely on fossil fuel-based energy on the farm. So generally, these will be diesel generators. Our aim is really to replace these diesel generators with clean energy. But then we run into a different problem. There is no affordability to invest. These farmers don't have the capital to invest in these new technologies. That's where we really come in by innovating on the business model side of things. So we remove the upfront cost barrier for these farmers to access these technologies. And our inclusive, customer-centric model is a pay-per-use model, which is a bit different from pay-go. A lot of us know what pay-go is. So basically, we are servitizing the industry. Currently, we have 3 verticals, so we are offering 3 different services. So the company itself finances all of the assets, deploys them, installs them, and operates and maintains for their complete lifespan, and then offers services. And these are tied to the cash flows of the users. And these are community-driven projects, so each asset is not just used by one farmer or farming family, but several of them. So we offer solar irrigation, which is a big input need. Generally, they would be spending about 25% of all input cost just on irrigation. And then there is solar milling or agro-processing. This would be post-harvest. And then again, post-harvest for storage of horticulture perishable produce. So extending the shelf life, reducing wastage, helping them realize higher prices in the market. And so those are the 3 services. Together with that, so these are revenue-generating services that we offer, but still at very affordable tariff relative to the incumbent, which is diesel. These are 20 to 50% cheaper, what we offer. And then to build their capacity, then we also have agronomists on the team that help them diversify, intensify their cropping, move from 2 seasons to 3 seasons. In some cases, help them transition to high-value crops. So it's not only carbon emission savings, of course, that is a big goal, but it is also social, economical transformation for these and creating jobs at the last mile as well. So I'll stop there for now.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, and at Hyperion, there's 2 big problems that we are looking to solve. One is the fact that concrete, this material that is pretty much everywhere, generates 2.8 billion tons of CO2 every year. So we need concrete for almost every building infrastructure, but unfortunately it's very polluting. And at the same time, the way we build, basically concrete construction, hasn't changed in decades or even more. It's very labor intensive, time consuming, it's dangerous, and by 2030, 40% of skilled labor are going to retire. So there's no labor to build. And what we are doing is we have developed technology which is a combination of large-scale 3D printing with low-carbon concrete. And we are focusing on building infrastructure in a more efficient way. So basically, we can reduce the amount of materials from, for example, foundations by optimizing design, but we combine this also by using recycled materials from different waste streams, like mining tailings, slags from the steel industry. We have used as well some carbon as a byproduct from different industrial processes. So we are experts also in taking waste and turning it into more sustainable forms of concrete. And we are helping energy companies, big industrial companies, to reduce their emissions and become more efficient in their projects.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, Energy Dome, Paul Smith. We have developed a very innovative form of long-duration energy storage. This is the kind of energy storage that we need, which goes beyond what traditional lithium batteries can do at present, which enables the grid to go beyond 50% renewables on the grid up to 60, 70, 80, 90%. Our technology is based on actually using carbon dioxide in a way which takes advantage of the properties of that particular gas, which are very convenient for use in our process. We call it the CO2 battery. We've already demonstrated it extensively. It's grid connected at our pilot plant in Italy. We've raised quite a bit of funding recently, and we're now going to roll it out globally. It's a global solution which has potential for some hundreds of gigawatts of installations around the world.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Vi. I'm one of the co-founders of Heatrix, and at Heatrix we're tackling the heavy industry like cement, steel, and chemical industries, because those industries they need a lot of energy to produce their materials, and that energy is in form of industrial heat and high temperature heat, especially above 600 degrees normally, and they are responsible for about 12% of global CO2 emissions. And right now, that is basically, they're producing it by burning fossil fuels. And we are developing a solution to replace that kind of fossil fuels. And then that's basically converting renewable electricity into storable heat. So we have two components. We have an electric heater. That's basically a big industrial hairdryer, so to say, because we're heating up air up to 1500 degrees. And we combine that heater with the thermal storage in order to balance out the fluctuations of the renewables and to provide the energy continuously to the industry. And it's going to be a plug-and-play approach, so we don't want to replace existing plants because that's just too expensive, too much complexity, and it would cost the industry too much downtime of the plant where they can't produce. So it's about retrofitting their existing plants and upgrading their burners with the renewable source. And yeah, so that's basically how we want to contribute to fighting climate change. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So 5 really great solutions, 5 solutions in very different sectors, but all sectors or all problems that we urgently need to decarbonize. And I was thinking of asking, do you think that startups are better at tackling these problems that we have? But obviously you're convinced that startups are better, otherwise you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. And so I wanted to know, why do you think you can be better than, for example, large corporates in tackling certain problems? Why do we need startups and their innovation to tackle this? And I'm just going to, let's go back again, so we can get back to you.
Okay, I think the typical answer is that we are probably much more faster. We are not constrained by, I don't know, a lot of vertical hierarchical processes where you can't decide anything by yourself, maybe. So we are much more flexible in terms of pivoting or more, getting out there more to don't rely on proven processes. We can do faster decisions. And I think startups have this kind of entrepreneurial spirit from the very beginning, where you just try a lot of things and you just go out there and try instead of proving it first if that works or not. And then it's more like try and error, which makes it more faster at the end to get to a solution somewhere.
Okay, thank you. Paul.
Yeah, I mean, agree 100% with that. Of course, I'd add that, you know, one of the things, I came from a somewhat corporate environment, having done sales around the world with quite large companies, and then I'm working now for a startup, so I maybe have an interesting perspective that the focus is really, really important. So within a startup company, you are literally morning, noon, and night, and quite often a lot of the night, focused entirely on that specific problem. And you're so intensely involved with it that you develop such a deep understanding of the issue, and you talk with so many people around that particular subject that you really, really get to understand the issue deeply. And that's incredibly important. And I do not believe that any big company can actually do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with both. And then maybe quickly following up on what Paul was saying, it's interesting because, for example, I don't have a technical background. My background is in business, but I've been doing this for the past 6-7 years. And just in a very short period of time, in a couple of years, you become an expert and know more about anybody else in the industry, I would say, because it's kind of an obsession. And this is something that just by throwing money to a problem in a very big company, you cannot match, you know? So it's a combination of speed, both on the technology development, trying to continuously perhaps adjust and evolve that solution to make it work. At the same time, looking into how to roll it out to fit into the existing supply chains. That's a huge challenge as well, that I think startups are in a good position to do it compared to the big companies.
Okay, thank you.
So while I largely agree with all three, I mean, no contest over there, but I will add another element to it. Of course, agility, efficiency, you know, these are advantages for any startup. No bureaucratic hurdles, less administrative costs, but I think we can't all work in silos. It's not, you know, it's either this or that. It's not startups or corporates. I think it should be an ecosystem approach. All stakeholders are required. Yeah, I mean, we are facing a crisis. We're decarbonizing at the rate of 0.5% yearly, whereas we need to decarbonize at the rate of 15% yearly to, you know, stay under the 1.5 degree target. So I think it'll take all of us to do this together. There are a lot of things we do better as startups, but then again, we still need a lot of support, whether it's financing, talent, whether it's government policies. So all that needs to come together, whether it's investors like Iris and Aneri, accelerator programs, right? So yeah, so because we may have great ideas, you know, but we don't have everything that we need. So yes, we need a lot of support as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I will answer it differently. When we are looking at any application or any existing way of providing a solution, if it's a new entrant coming in, they are forced to find or try a new approach to it or new solution to it, and that's typically startups would think like that, because, like, for example, when we were looking at 10 years back, all the public transport ferries were all diesel. So it is only a different startup can come in and think, okay, how can I dominate this industry? I cannot do that by making diesel ferries because there are already existing players. So how can I do it differently? This is how we tend to think, approach it differently, and that opens up many of these better solutions. Just like in electric car, right? So you can't have a startup come in and dominate a petrol engine vehicle. But you can do that if you are doing an electric. So there's an opportunity for new player to come in and dominate the sector if you are thinking differently and you come up with a different solution, which is exactly what we are trying to do in the sector in India. And 10 years hence, at least in our state of Kerala, the government has officially decided that no more public ferries, public transport will be diesel ferries. It is all, they're going to shift it to solar electric. But it took 10 years, but it is possible only by startups.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think I absolutely agree, and but also a very good point that it's not just a start. It's not silos. It's not a startup or the corporate, and it's an ecosystem, and we need that ecosystem approach to move in the direction that we need to move. Yet I think we're all still encountering various obstacles or hurdles. So, what in your case or in your industry or for your startup is the one of the biggest barriers or hurdles that you're still facing in order to scale? What would you need to change so that you can say, okay, and now we can just reach for the sky? I'll start again with you.
Yeah, at our stage where we already established the product and solution works and it's better, for us it's purely execution in terms of working capital. This is specifically because the boat building and the nature of boat building is customized and built to order rather than assembly line like cars. We want to change that with some standard products like fishing boat, make an assembly line standardized. But ferries and big ferries are built to order, which means somebody orders and you get it in 6 months. So it's typically large amount of working capital which startups like us have to play. And not in at least for us in India, the banking facility or debt finance is not very friendly unless you have a heavy capital or land, etc., to support it. And there are no grants or big grants like EU grants for clean tech projects. So that is where we struggle in terms of working capital to execute the orders we manage to get after convincing the client. So for us, it's purely working capital.
Scale up, quite a few hurdles, challenges, of course. One would be, generally resources, all sorts of resources, finances. Although more money is flowing into climate tech in general, but again, from an Indian context, there's not enough domestic investments available. So most of our investments come out from outside of India. And then there are, capital flow barriers from the central government and so on and so forth. They make it really difficult, especially for external commercial borrowings or loans. Like he also mentioned, from domestic banks, not very friendly to startups. Because they don't accept collaterals that we can offer and so on and so forth. Talent can be, in our specific context, because we work in rural areas, talent can be a challenge as well. And then I'm talking more global, and policy, and sometimes policy mismatch or conflicting policies between the state and the center. They are in opposition to each other. So you don't know where you stand, and if there's no stability, you're building a business based on the current conditions. Tomorrow, if it suddenly changes, then you can be in trouble, and that could be pretty high risk for you. So I would say those are some challenges for scale up for a company like ours.
All right, thank you, Fernando.
For us, I would say again resources. On the funding side, our company is developing hardware, software, and materials. So there's a very heavy R&D aspect, and it's not cheap. So there's a big side where we need investment, and that's always a challenge to be able to grow. On the other hand, I would say that Hyperion is in the construction sector, so we are in probably the most conservative industry. It's the least automated. You have these very old construction companies, and it's very difficult to change their mindset. We have a very fragmented industry, very little players and very big ones, so many different steps within the value chain. And what happens with us is that sometimes we need to convince all of them to be able to make something happen. So we have found a way by going directly to the big end client, but still we need the buy-in from these relevant players, and this is something that once by focusing on certain markets, on key markets, and finding the right partners, we would be able to scale up and roll this out around the world.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
Yeah, so we're only 3 years old, and I guess our answer would change significantly depending on when we were answering the question. It just so happens right now we have gone through that fundraising and came out of that in a good state because the business model was fundamentally solid. We're relying a lot on existing supply chains and manufacturers with large corporates. I mean, we're not intending to develop our own manufacturing capacity. We're rather relying on existing ones, and that's one of the things which will allow us to scale quickly. We are intending to actually become a big corporate ourselves, I have to say, in the near future. So I wouldn't, badmouth the big corporates at all. So what we're facing right now, the current issue is basically one of commercialization. There's a gap between all of the great words and stuff being said in the sessions earlier today and what industry was saying as well in the session. I think we should have a much more prominent role in that. I think we should be heard centrally by the whole audience, not at the end of the day. I'm very pleased to be here, by the way. Thanks for that. So we need to be much more central in the debate, much more prominent, because this is where a lot of the solutions are. We're bringing new tools to the toolbox of the energy transition. I mean, we need a new toolbox. It's not the existing toolbox that's going to fix the problem. So that needs to be out there. And then having understood that, basically what we need is a much more focused approach on how we actually translate all of those good words into actions. So we need task force approach. It's no good just having a minister responsible for this or a general secretary for that. We need a task force approach who are literally told that they must make sure that projects are developed and deployed starting now. And that means developing projects takes 2 or 3 years. And if there's not a development pipeline right now, we've got a problem, and there isn't. So that needs to be addressed. And that's our issue.
Thank you very much. Just one quick, before I move on to Vi, just one quick follow-up, because I think you touched on a really good point here. And with that task force approach, I mean, you've worked in different countries, or at least you've worked globally. So do you feel like there's already one country out there that is sort of going in the right direction with that?
Interestingly enough, I think the country which has obviously setting the pace at the moment is the US. And it's not necessarily with a task force approach, although that is happening at various state levels. It's more about setting the targets. And once you set targets and people understand that there is a potential revenue stream to chase, then that changes the game entirely. And people do actually start physically, developing projects on the back of that. And that's a bit of a gap still in Europe.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you, Paul. I think it's a lot of about talking about startups, what they can do and how great their solutions are, but there's not so much about talking with the startups about how can they actually implement their solution, how they can scale, what kind of help and support they need. So our main or two main challenges also is On the one side, that we are addressing a very, very conservative industry as well. So I don't know who's more conservative, is it like heavy industry or the constructions, but I think they're both related. So since because of the heavy industry, you have a lot of engineers, and the most best speech for an engineer, or the most slogan is never change a running system. So what has been working for like the past 100 years, it has to work for the next 100 years. And so that's really, really hard to change their mind, to really try new technologies and go in a different path. And the second one is also, of course, the funding, right? So we are also doing quite heavy hardware, and we did another approach than typical people would do, so starting in the university and doing the research there and then go out. So we founded first the company and then doing developing the technology, because I did that before. I did my first technology development within the institution, and it took us 10 years to go out, and we don't just have the time for that. So it's not. I don't think it's the best environment to develop new technologies within research, especially if you want to do applied research there. So especially for this kind of setups where you have a really science-based technology developed within a startup and not within the research, there's just no really funding for that, especially when you have a capital-intensive hardware. So VCs shy away because it's too early. They say, okay, we don't invest in research, but you don't get any grants, so of course, because public funding is always just like 50%, especially in Europe, right? So, but where do you get the other 50% to really balance that? So I think there's a huge gap as well, and would be great to talk to politicians, VCs with them, and find a solution for that, especially.
All right, thank you very much. And again, agree very much also with the point that we need to talk more with each other and hear each other. And it's something that we were working towards. And absolutely. And as we're already sort of coming to an end, I just quickly wanted to see if we actually have some questions from the audience, because it's very, very different startups with different solutions, different industries. But I just wanted to give you the opportunity, if you do have a question, to ask them now before I ask the last round of questions to the panelists. Okay. If not, you can still ask at the very end if if you want to. But I would like to ask you, now that you are entrepreneurs, you've worked you've set up your startups, and obviously everyone makes mistakes, comes across some stumbling blocks, but you succeeded, you're doing really well. And looking back now, if someone wants to found in the energy or climate tech sector, what would be one advice that you would like to give someone starting fresh, saying, do not make the same mistake that I made, or this is something an advice that I would like to give young entrepreneurs. Please, if you want to start. Or if someone already has their advice ready, to give you a bit more time to think about it.
I'll go first then.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, like Iris already said, I mean, don't be afraid to fail, number one. But there's always room for, pivoting. That's what we did. We didn't get it right the moment we started, right? Also try and understand the problem first at a much deeper level. We spent nearly a year only trying to understand the pain points of the intended customers. And then speaking to lots of stakeholders, come back, design your solution, redesign them if it requires. So a more participatory approach is what we did. And that helped. You had less problems with the solution that you were. You will still learn along the way. And so you got to be patient. You'll have to refine your model. You'll have to continuously refine your processes. And collaborate a lot, I would suggest. Don't try to do everything yourself. So I think if you take care of those few of those things, there's no reason why you will not succeed.
All right, thank you. Already a great set of advice.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. All right, go ahead then.
No, as typically when engineers try to find a solution, and I'm criticizing because I'm an engineer, we tend to focus on features and not talk of benefits. So we tend to think of what we can do rather than what customers need. So in my early attempts at, before figuring out public transport was the real solution where I should go, I had done some couple of experiments and mistakes in smaller leisure boats, fishing boats, earlier I'm saying. So those mistakes were like you come up with the technology, great, but nobody wants to use it because of the price point. So fundamentally you have to think from the customer's perspective and think of benefits rather than features, which is what I learned the hard way, which I keep telling wherever I get an opportunity to interact with younger audience, I share this so that they don't have to learn by making the mistake. But younger people are much smarter, so they already know now by many other sources. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Who wants to go next? Fernando?
Yeah, I can go. So I like to say that we are an accidental climate startup. We really we didn't start with this focus. We wanted to change the construction industry, but just like by talking to so many different clients, different players in the industry, different or related big companies, for example, we realized that there was a big need for more sustainable solutions, right? Now, these sustainable solutions have to be faster and cheaper always. It's faster, cheaper, and more sustainable. But we tailored our approach by learning from this evolving path, let's say, and then becoming this climate-focused startup, right? With we have big goals of decarbonizing the industry, but again, while bringing these efficiencies to the industry. So learn a lot from talking to clients, understand what they need. And maybe just one more thing, we try to, maybe similar to the engineer point of view, right? We also tried to push the technology to sell it to the client, but we really didn't understand how the supply chain, which is quite complex, works, right? And we have changed our model, and now customers can simply buy our end products, right? Anybody here even can buy a water tank from us or a foundation, right? So it's very easy. Instead of trying to convince a company which is already quite, let's say, structured and bureaucratic to adopt a new technology which is relatively complex. So think of what would be the best way for them to adopt and tailor your offer in that way.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I just take it from a slightly human perspective. I mean, what I've seen working, rather from the positive side, what I've seen working and what I love about our company is the fact that at the core there's a really tight, very complementary team. And that's an amazingly strong combination to have. And so I guess the converse of that is, you know, no matter how brilliant you are, there's stuff that you're not that good at. And figure out who is really complementary to you, and they may not always agree with you. That's actually a good thing, and figure that out and make that team, and you'll fly.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, there's almost nothing to add, but maybe from a scientific view here again, if you come, especially for tech founders, if you come from a scientific environment where it's about finding or understanding the problem, but now if you go out there and you want to like build a startup, you have to focus on the solution and not the problem, right? So it's not about understanding the problem in the very, very deep. It's rather really maybe understand only 80%, but the most important thing is to find the solution and to just move away, and then not yes, I understand it at the deep, but try and error more, and it's be more experimental, much more than before.
All right, thank you very much. The famous Pareto principle. Okay, great pieces of advice here. To listen more, to be patient, to shift, to reshift, to find complementary team members. I think all really valuable tips. And if you follow them, one day you might even win the SET award as well. So thank you very much for your input. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying with us, to all of you. I think there is now the award closing, session closing ceremony at the Weltsaal. If you want to stick around a little bit longer, we'll be here as well if you still want to ask questions. Thank you also to Aneri and Iris again for joining the panel as well. And yes, enjoy the rest of your stay in Berlin if you're traveling, and hopefully see you all again next year. Thank you very much.